And coming up on today's Green Signals, your favourite railway podcast, we ask if the Jacobite Steam Train is about to have a powerful rival in the new partnership between Locomotive Services Ltd and the Scottish Railway Preservation Society. We speak to LSL Managing Director Tony Bush to ask the questions. We preview a not-to-be-missed interview coming very soon with former Transport for London Commissioner Andy Byford. Richard and me take a thrilling ride on the Ffestiniog Railway's Gravity Train. And some shocking images from Mexico highlight the true dangers of trespass. And Avanti West Coast has some good news. It welcomes the final refurbished Pendolino back to service, completing the biggest ever UK fleet upgrade. And welcome to Green Signals, your railway podcast. From me, Nigel Harris, here in lovely Lincolnshire today, and
me, Richard Bowker, also in a very hot and sunny Wiltshire. But I think that's kind of superfluous, isn't it? Because the whole country's bathed in sun
I know,
today.
Summer's finally arrived, but I had the weather forecast this morning saying it's cooler after today or the weekend, so...
Marvellous.
There we go. Enjoy it while it's here, if you like that sort of thing. I've been a bit of a misery. I don't really like sitting in the sun, so it won't bother me. First of all, we must give our enormous gratitude to those of you who have left us super thanks this week on YouTube. Robert Davey, the Independent Brigline Rail Group, Stephen Pritchard, all of whom have left us super thanks more than once, which is very humbling. We continue to be thus humbled by your generosity, especially when so many of you are now contributing regularly. Thank you from all three of us. We really do appreciate it.
We do indeed. And we had some great messages from people from letting us know from where they're listening around the world. If you remember last week, we said, do tell us where you are.
This was interesting. This was after the driver in New Zealand, wasn't it? Or the blokes on the train, yeah.
Indeed. We had Adrian Barron watching from St Vincent and the Grenadines in the West Indies. I hope he's watching some cricket as well. That's absolutely marvellous. JT, who was watching from his balcony in Benidorm. Rod Reed in Melbourne, Australia. Drew from the outback of Western Australia in the Pilbara. Marvellous part of the world, that. And Richard Hayter from who's in Caslow, which is in Canada, in British Columbia. So absolutely remarkable.
I'm glad you read that bit, Richard. I wouldn't have been able to resist doing some awful Australian accent, which you would have been horrified at.
Well, not just me.
Yes,
basically
I'd certainly had your wife on the warpath as well.
Indeed.
Some glamorous locations there, Richard. Just as glamorous, of course. Richard and me were in North Wales at the weekend on the Ffestiniog Railway, which is always a joy. More later in the show. But we were both genuinely bowled over by the number of people who approached us, took the trouble to come up and say how much they enjoy Green Signals. Thanks so much. It does mean a lot to hear that you enjoy the show as much as you do, and we'll carry on doing it and hope you'll continue enjoying it. So do let us know what you think if and when you see us out and about on tour.
Indeed. When you say glamorous, Richard and me, you actually meant the Ffestiniog Railway. You didn't mean you and me.
I did.
As
yes.
in glamorous.
Oh,
you did.
Oh, glamour. No, right. No. I meant the Ffestiniog. Glamorous is not an adjective I'd apply to either you or me.
Speak for yourself. Anyway, when we were on the platform at Portmaddock and the Ffestiniog Railway, a couple of very nice guys came up separately and just said hi and said how much they were enjoying it. We had Sam Dixon came and said hello. Jonathan Flood came and said hello. Really, really kind. And thank you for letting us know that you enjoy the show. Although I think the last one we generated some fairly polarized views, I think it's fair to say, Nigel.
Well, yeah, more than the Flying Scotsman comments from the show before. It's bound to happen, really, and they always say you shouldn't discuss politics or money, though I'm not sure that can ever apply to a railway podcast, which is all about politics or money. And we were discussing both in considerable detail. There was a real mixed bag of views, I think it's fair to say.
There was. One of the things we did on YouTube, we can only do this on our YouTube channel, but there's a thing called a community tab. so we did a poll. Steph put a poll up there. And I think we've had about 250 responses. I mean, it's just extraordinary, right?
It's pretty good.
And the question was, it was good. The question was, after listening to episode 38, which was the general election one last week, we said, which general election manifesto do you think would deliver the best outcome for the railway and transport more widely? Let us know why in the comments. Well, the last bit was probably a bit risky in hindsight, but anyway, the results of this were really very interesting.
Weren't
and if you're on,
just
yeah, okay, don't take the punchline, all right. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see a little pie chart showing the numbers now, but the split was this. So Labour won it by a country mile, 66%. Reform, 15%. The Green Party, 9%. The Lib Dems, 7%. And the Conservatives, 3%. So that was really quite remarkable, wasn't it? I mean, I don't think Sir John Curtis needs to be too concerned about our polling just yet, but I thought that was quite an interesting spread. What do you think?
It is absolutely fascinating. I mean, 250 is a bit of it is literally a snapshot among a few like-minded people, but it's enough of a number to discuss. And I think the Labour thing doesn't really surprise me. What does open your eyes is the Conservatives scraping in bottom of the heap at a paltry 3%, which just shows the contempt for the Conservatives among the railway audience that we're talking to in particular. And I'm always very sceptical of vox pops on TV generally and polls because, you know, you've a TV reporter wandering around in a crowd and randomly selecting people and hopefully randomly coming up with some sort of balance. But there was one on this morning from Bolton on Sky with Greg Milam, the old US correspondent. Bolton bus station overnight, and it was noticeable the degree of absolute disillusion and contempt from everyone for all politicians. I'm a seasoned general election observer. I always get my snacks and drinks in for election night to see where the Portillo moment's going to come. But I cannot recall such a widespread disillusion with all politicians. It was absolutely noticeable.
And that was reflected, Nigel, in the comments we got on YouTube.
Yeah.
Exactly that. There was a general cynicism about it, about politics.
There's always been a degree of,
generally.
oh, well, they're all the same. But this was really biting. We are sick of it sort of thing. And there was a comment piece over the week. Was it one this morning I spotted? I think possibly in the Telegraph, so I would put that warning up. But this chap saying that no Prime Minister has ever called a general election while being 20% behind in the polls with 6 months to go. And when you put it like that, you think, is it the biggest political mistake ever? I
think that we might still have some interesting moments on election. I really do. I don't know what they are. So
that's why they'll be interesting.
Surprising. So it's not a very insightful observation, is it? But there you go. There was one absolutely brilliant comment, and my favourite by far.
Here we go. Shall I just leave for a minute or two?
No. You've got to stay for this. Although I suspect the person who made it didn't make it intending to make us smile or brighten our day. I think it probably intended.
Well, he did
a different reaction. But anyway, so Alan Robertson, I can say that because that's his name on YouTube, said, as a rail enthusiast, I thought I would be interested in this topic, but half the time, the man on the left of the screen was just pouring scorn and bile. Can't you shut up so we can listen to the man on the right, who at least is trying to tell us what the policies are? What do you think of that man on the left?
Well, love me or hate me, but don't be indifferent. So there's definitely the answer is there. Am I going to shut up? Of course I'm not. I'm glad to have provoked a response. What I was slightly sore about, you haven't actually said it there, but the last line of that comment was, he was very critical of the word tosh, which was actually yours, not mine.
I think we possibly both used it on more than one occasion, but all right, I'll take that.
But reverted into schoolyard mode, you started it. But
no, you didn't. Yeah, you did, right.
But it is a heck of a comment, I suppose.
It's brilliant. It's absolutely superb. So if that was the intended reaction, if that was not the intended reaction, Alan, I'm sorry about that. But just so you know, that as a team, we are already using that one quite a lot
I
internally.
bet. There was also
Steph and I, you know.
There was also somebody who said, has Nigel lost his red rosette? Which I thought was a tad unfair.
Yeah, that was a bit harsh. Richard Hayter, the aforementioned listener in Western Canada, also said this: please can you move your mic so that we can see your faces? Martin of Lumo shows how with no mic or headphones, he was just as good. I can honestly tell you, Richard, you are pretty much the only person that I can ever think of having said, I would like to see your faces. But anyway, that's kind. So thanks very much indeed.
Indeed. But there's plenty of banter, wasn't there, Richard?
There was plenty of banter, and that's great. Just one serious point. We do love the banter, as you can tell, and we love the comments. Sadly, I suspect it was inevitable with a show that was all about politics. There were some comments that definitely weren't banter and definitely did cross the line. So we removed them, and we'll do that where we think it's right.
It's our show, and we'll cut what we want.
Yeah. So, but look, it's fun. Let's have fun. Let's have banter. And let's make sure that we have more opportunities to tell the man on the left to shut up. That'd be great.
But if you're getting abusive in an argument, it's a sign that your case isn't a good one and you've lost it, really, isn't it? So
indeed,
we don't do that sort of thing. Okay, let's move on. Here's a new thing. We thought it would be fun to have a quickfire news round each week to see how much we can pack in over about 3 minutes. Well, 3 minutes max, if you like. So here goes for this week. First, congratulations to former Permanent Secretary of the Department for Transport, Sir Philip Rutnam, and previously interviewed on the Premier Railway podcast, that's this one, for being appointed the new chair of the highly influential National Institute of Economic and Social Research. Excellent.
Yeah, it is excellent. Big job, big person, great result. Also noticed this week that Heathrow Express have had their track access rights extended to 2028. I must admit that triggered an interesting thought in my mind, which maybe it's for a future discussion, which is now that we've got the Elizabeth line going from the city centre and from, say, Docklands to Heathrow, I wonder what the market for Heathrow Express is these days. So, but anyway, they've had their track access rights extended, and maybe we shall have a look at that in due course.
Because it's not a cheap ticket either, is it?
No.
Yep, indeed so. And sticking with South West London, also in the news this week, we see the newly designated Class 4584s for South Western Railway have entered service. 17 have been refurbished thus far, with another 11 to follow. They will be used on suburban services, while South West Railway's new Arterio fleet, currently stored largely at Long Marston, I think, is introduced, hopefully, this millennium.
Harsh. Now, this is not so much a news piece, but important nonetheless. Do you remember we had the chat last week about Purda?
We did.
And whether it was actually okay for Mark Harper to announce the purchase of 10 Aventras for TfL whilst there was an election campaign underway. Well, we received the following from a gentleman called Phil Woodward. And he said this, regarding the question of whether the ministerial decision to approve the order and keep Derby making trains is allowed to be made during Purda, he said, I'm intimately familiar with the Purda guidance, or pre-election period guidance, as the Cabinet Office insists on calling it these days, for ministers and civil servants. The principle is decisions that can be deferred should be, but not if deferral is obviously not in the public interest. So if, for example, delay would lead to massive extra cost or would mean the objective of procuring trains at a reasonable price would be less likely to be achieved, then officials could at the very least put the option of pressing the go button to the minister. The minister is still the minister and has all the same powers he had before Purda began. So I don't know what role Mr. Woodward has, but that does sound extremely knowledgeable. We've heard from other sources as well that actually, there were discussions behind the scenes, and kind of everybody politically agreed this was the right thing to do. So it did. But that was very interesting. So that's very helpful. And that's it for the Railway News Round this week.
Just squeeze in a quick reminder, if we've got any railway PRs listening and they want to slot anything into us for inclusion in our news round, they should send an email to press release to our email address.
info@greensignals.org.
I'm glad you said that because I momentarily forgot it.
I could tell.
Blank, which is not unusual. Right, and now the main story we want to chat about today is a heritage one, but also one that loads of people are talking about at the moment all across the country. And that's the news that this last week, the Scottish Railway Preservation Society, based at the Bowness and Kinneil Railway, and the Royal Scot Locomotive and General Trust have announced a new long-term partnership for running heritage trains in Scotland. SRPS operates the Bowness and Kinneil Railway, and it is Britain's longest established operator of scenic mainline railway excursions, having started in 1970 when it established its own Mark I set. So it's not a newcomer in any way, shape or form. Royal Scot is part of the Locomotive Services Group, LSL, which operates luxury rail tours all around the UK. So, what's this partnership for then, Richard? All very interesting and a bit unexpected, wasn't it?
Yeah, but both absolutely interesting and unexpected. So the statement from the Scottish Railway Preservation Society, the SRPS, says that LSL is going to provide, I'll quote this, traditional style railway carriage accommodation. It mentions that SRPS has invested significantly in overhauling its carriages, the ones you just mentioned, to meet, quote, the latest safety standards. Now, LSL is apparently going to stable locomotives and rolling stock at the Bowness and Kinneil Railway. And this, which is the bit that has got everybody talking about, LSL will provide locomotives and support services for the SRPS's own day excursion rail tours around Scotland.
Interesting. If we were playing word association games, the words Fort William and Mallaig might spring straight to mind as a result of this conversation. Interesting in that quote, Richard, that it's not just the SRPS's Mark Is, is it? He says that LSL will be taking carriages to the SRPS, some of its own. So this is clearly a sizable operation, isn't it?
It is, and there's quite a lot to unpack, isn't there? So since this is one of the issues of the moment, we thought we'd invite LSL to come and have a chat about the partnership and what it might mean for rail tours in Scotland and more widely. And we're delighted to say that LSL's Managing Director, Tony Bush, agreed to join us for a chat. And here it is.
Well, thanks for joining us, Tony. We really do appreciate it. And we know listeners and viewers on YouTube will be really keen to hear from you. So let's start by, can we just talk a bit about how this partnership came about? What led to the deal being done? Was it your idea, the SRPS idea?
Well, I've known the SRPS and some people within the SRPS for many, many years and interacted with them before. So there was a bit of a sort of a pre-standing relationship going on. From our perspective, obviously we've invested heavily in all of our assets, including our Mark I fleet. But it takes us a long time and it costs us a huge amount of money to do it. We thought that given our position, and particularly the acquisition of Upperby Depot at Carlisle, we wanted to really start to think about operating more steam and diesel charts in Scotland. But in an ideal world, we wouldn't be trailing our Mark Is the length and breadth of the country every week. So we were talking to SRPS, who had a couple of Mark I vehicles up for sale. And off the back of that conversation, our engineering director expanded it and said, would you be interested in a bit of a deeper relationship, given we understand a lot about the challenges of fitting CDL and the cost of fitting CDL to Mark Is, and we certainly don't want anybody to, be prohibited from operating on the railway because the financial situation is restrictive. So that's really where the conversation started. We've had a really open and transparent chat with them about all the aspects of what we're talking about. And we're keen to help them. Jeremy and I are both very, very into preservation and making sure that preservation and preserved vehicles have an opportunity to work on the mainline railway. There was a bit of a synergy there for us all. So we managed to agree with them that we'd sort of step in, help, but generate a mutually beneficial contractual framework that allows them to complete their work on their Mark 1 vehicles, get them back out on the main line, and us to benefit from that.
So can I just talk a little bit more about that synergy point you said there? So, and it may just be my understanding on this really, but they've got a rake of Mark 1s. It looked from the press release, though, that you were going to not only assist with them with finalising the conversion and the CDL on their Mark 1s, but also you would be storing some of your own Mark 1s on the Bowness and Kinneil Railway as well. So could you just explain that a little bit? Is what's actually going to be based on the Bowness and Kinneil Railway, and are you going to need some more infrastructure to be able to do that?
I don't think there's going to be a mass exodus from crew to the Bowness and Kinneil Railway of our assets. Their assets are very much their own, and they use those assets on their own running days, galas, and events, and we have no wish to interfere with that. What we've agreed with them is that we can, at certain points of the year, pre-agreed, because we put our operating plans together in October of every year preceding the year that we're going to be working in.
Right.
We'll involve them in that process and tell them what we'd like to do in Scotland using predominantly their set, but where necessary, supplemented with our own vehicles. Okay. So outside of the main Sappho set, we have multiple other vehicles that we could actually use to supplement the train to put together a nice rail tour set that we can use in Scotland. On top of that, as everybody I think probably knows, we've just completed the complete reconstruction of Blue Peter. Mm-hmm. And we'd like to use that on the Aberdeen, Inverness, Edinburgh corridors. So it makes huge sense to us to be able to have somewhere we can keep Blue Peter when it's in Scotland and other members of the fleet for stabling, servicing, because in Steam world, it's a long way from crew to Scotland.
So you're definitely establishing an operating base there. Blue Peter, have you any idea what other locos you might base there?
We're planning to send Blue Peter up into Scotland. I would imagine the B1 will go up there from time to time. And then some of the diesel fleet, the Deltic, I would imagine, will go up there. The 45 will go up there. And it's just really handy for us to be able to have a safe haven with friendly people that we can keep our assets in if things go wrong. Just last weekend we had part of the infrastructure fell on one of our 47s and smashed the windscreens, for example. Right. To be able to have a safe haven to go in there, do repairs if we have a problem is massively beneficial.
Long way back to crew. As you said, the SRPS as well, they're a bit overlooked sometimes, but they have been around a long time and are very experienced in all this, aren't they?
They are. And they're a very professional outfit, very well run.
So
seriously good skills.
So it's a good mix. So you'll be providing locomotives and support services for the SRPS's own day excursion rail tours in Scotland. So are we likely to see an increase in the rail tours on offer in Scotland? Do you see it as a growth area for you as well?
I think we do, yeah. As I say, it's been a long reach for us from crew to really operate in Scotland with any kind of meaningful presence. I'm not talking about world domination here, but the establishment of Carlisle was a key factor for us to have something on the border. Jeremy and I looked in a lot of detail at acquiring the St. Rollox works at Springburn a couple of years ago for exactly this purpose. Right. And unfortunately, that didn't come to anything. But we've been looking for some time as to how we can establish that strength. Obviously, we've got Southall, Crewe, Carlisle, and then into Scotland, and we're strong on the west side of the country, so it made sense to us to just establish that footprint there.
Quite good strategically as well to have Carlisle and the Bowness and Kinneil Railway east and west sort of sides of Scotland, isn't it?
Exactly. We are interested in partnerships of mutual benefit, not one-sided benefit. So we want to make sure we don't interfere with their business. We actually supplement the things that they do. And the usage we have of the Mark 1s provides, that mutual benefit across the piece, really. We will also, if one of our assets happens to be up on their railway and they're running a gala or a weekend, we'll make the asset available, probably send some crews up there because it's good relief for our crews to to do those kind of events.
Have a bit of fun and a classic win-win.
Exactly.
Now, one of the things that Jeremy Hosking said in the press release is actually building on what you just said there about sort of working together with other parties. He said, Mark 1s remain unfailingly popular with travellers, and the upgraded features they require to operate on the main line in 2024 and beyond requires external finance. We are pleased to provide this. Now, I'm absolutely certain, there's commercial confidentiality here, so we're not trying to pry into that. But you've got a lot of experience in fitting CDL, for instance, to Mark 1s and presumably other things as well. Can you just give us an idea of the scale of what's involved here with this this investment to be able to keep these Mark 1s, which everybody loves, running for as long as possible?
Sure. There's a number of different ways of looking at it. When LS Group really started to get serious about 8 years ago, around the time I joined Jeremy, and we looked at the TOC and how we were going to take it forward. Nobody would sell us anything, and what we ended up buying was some really dilapidated old vehicles. So from our perspective, the Bonus and Keneal team, the SRPS team, were probably ahead of us because they had some vehicles that they've been looking after for quite a while. So our startup costs were significant because not only were we trying to comply with regulations, we were actually reconstructing vehicles. So we were taking Mark 1s down to the mainframe, completely rebuilding them. And during that time, our friends at the ORR came to see us on a number of occasions. Really positive and helpful relationship we have with the guys there, and they advised us on RSR 99. Regulation 4 is quite often overlooked because all the noises is about CDL, but Regulation 4 is a massive undertaking. Structural integrity of Mark 1 vehicles is a serious issue, and it extends to Mark 2s, of course, as well. So we were literally stripping shells off Mark 1 body frames and completely rebuilding them and rebuilding the body frames themselves. So our financial exposure has been significant with the Safos set, and that's the set we use as Steam Dreams as well. And that's why it's taken so long. On average, it was taking us 18 months to rebuild a Mark 1 vehicle. So we're kind of, in 8 years, we're still going. We're still rebuilding Mark 1 vehicles. Reg 5 and CDL suited us in a certain way because we were already stripping vehicles out to the mainframes. So our ability to graft in CDL equipment that we'd salvaged from, for example, Mark 3 vehicles that were going for scrap after PRM TSI came in, we were able to come up with really sensible, effective and reasonable cost solutions to that. The SRPS guys are kind of going at it from the other direction. They've got the set, they look after their set very carefully. That set's been around for quite a long time. And they're now trying to figure out how to graft the CDL system into the vehicle, but they're not planning to completely dismantle it. Although I have to say, they're doing a hell of a lot of work around Reg 4 compliance as well. So it's a big undertaking. And I think that's what Jeremy's kind of alluding to. It's a big undertaking for anyone. It doesn't have to be financially preventative if you think about it carefully and you plan it well, and that's what the guys up there are doing, and we just really want to support them in that.
And I suppose, just as a follow-up question to that briefly, I mean, if you are stripping them down to the mainframe, there's a huge amount of work involved in that. You're doing the CDL. If the regulations sort of didn't change now and you were able to carry them running, how much more life roughly of these vehicles now got? I mean, are they going to be with us for quite some time?
Yeah, I mean, everything we do is built around a philosophy of proper investment, long-term asset availability. So the Mark 1 fleet that we've built, I mean, is effectively, we've returned it to as new condition. So we're very confident that they could operate for 20, 25 years. Wow. In service without any real problems at all, and that's been our goal. We've removed some of the old technology. We've updated the vehicles from Commonwealth bogies, for example, to B4s, so they're more sustainable going forward. There's all with a view for maximum longevity, really.
So if you've taken them, just as a bit of a side question raised by that, Tony, you're taking them right down to the main frame. So you presumably must be building virtually new bodies for them.
Reskinning them completely, yeah.
Wow.
The crash ends of the vehicles are substantively replaced because they just over the years have rotted through due to negligence. So we replace the crash ends, do the overriders, and then we reskin the vehicles. And a lot of that work about 90% of that work we've done ourselves at Crew using our own staff.
So you must have built up a real base of expertise there at Crew on Mark 1s then. Very
much so. Mark 1s and steam engines, there's very little we don't know about either of those these days.
Well, I remember seeing a picture of Crew when it was first sort of unveiled to us, and I was thinking, oh my God, it looks like probably one of the best depots anywhere. Certainly looked very different to when I saw it as a boy's spotter as Crew Diesel Depot. Look, you've undoubtedly seen there's been a fair amount of informed and uninformed excitement and chatter about this announcement, in part because it's given you a presence in Scotland at a time when the Jacobite's future is at the very least in doubt. And, of course, not currently using Mark 1s. I mean, do you have any hopes, aspirations or intentions towards that market should the opportunity present?
The honest answer is, although I'm aware there's a lot of speculation, although I'm not particularly a social media person. In fact, I have virtually no social media presence at all. For obvious reasons, I am aware there's speculation, and actually there's not a lot in it, really. We've taken a lease on a small area of Tonner Fair sidings in Fort William, and that's really to support our Midland Pullman operation. So we go up with the Midland Pullman a number of times a year. We're building what's being dubbed as the Midland Pullman 2, which is a short set Midland Pullman that's going to do some 3-day tours up in Scotland and go all the way up to Fort William and Mallaig. So we had to go up there and prove our sidings so that we could take the lease on and do some driver training. The timing was very unfortunate because it coincided with a lot of noise about another operator who runs the Jacobite. But actually, we don't really have any designs on operating regular services up there. And, you know, those guys are in position, they're doing what they do, and it's not really for us to interfere.
But it's a toe in the door, and
it gives us some capability in Scotland, and that's what we wanted.
Yeah.
But, you know, as I say, world domination in Scotland is not on the agenda. We're not going to run lots more trains every year. You know, we've got a business plan that kind of talks about 150 trains a year across all of our brands, across all of the country. So moving from that to a twice daily operation on the West Highland line would be somewhat of a
leap,
significant increase for us.
It's a big thing, isn't it? Well, I must say, that's very exciting about Midland Pullman too. I had a slightly self-indulgent moment. I took my father on the Midland Pullman last year, and I've got to say, we had the best day out ever. The whole thing was just superb. Service, everything was just superb. So congratulations on that. It really is an absolute triumph.
Was that the day?
Well, it's good to get positive feedback.
It was the people that made it. They were just amazing, the team on the train.
We've got some really, really good staff and some great train managers who kind of run the show.
Was that the day you said you never stopped eating, Richard, when you come back?
It was. It literally was. Tony, I don't know what... you clearly incentivise them on how much food they can serve, because it literally... We started dinner in Carlisle on the way back to Royston was where we got off, and we finished the coffee and cheese in Cambridge. It was just extraordinary. So, look, thank you.
No, we've been really pleased with the Midland Pullman.
Looks great.
Right train, right place, right time, really.
Looks great, too.
Well, look, thanks so much for coming on the show today, Tony. Look, we really appreciate that. We've got to take the opportunity. We'd love, if it was possible, to have the opportunity as Green Signals to come and look and see what you're doing at Crew as well. Everything you do is just superb. Midland Pullman, Blue Peter, it all looks magnificent. So I hope that we might be able to be a bit cheeky and maybe come and have a chat in the future.
Give me a shout give me a shout. You're always welcome. We like showing people around. We're proud of what we do. So very welcome indeed.
Thank you. And thank you for your time today. We really do appreciate it.
We do.
No problem, anytime.
Thanks, Tony. So, Richard, what do you make of that then? The two words line dancing through my mind at the minute are careful and measured. Yeah,
good words. I agree. Although I would add professional.
Oh, God, yes.
I mean, there was professionalism through all of that. It was good. I mean, look, it's clear the effort that they've put into this this isn't something that's happened overnight. They've been doing this steadily, 18 months to rebuild a Mark 1. One of the things I thought was really interesting there, Nigel, was he was not, he didn't shy away from talking about Regulation 5, which is obviously CDL in the RSR 99 regulations, and also Regulation 4, which is a structural integrity one. I hadn't realised how much they'd done to their Mark 1s. And the message there for me was, if you want to run Mark 1s on the main line, you have to do it properly. You have to spend the money and you have to do it right.
Absolutely. I was fascinated when he followed his comments about reskinning the bodies with the completely rebuilt the crash ends, which are sort of the crash pillars and things, which he said something about they'd rotted away through neglect. Yeah. And I thought there was a message there.
Yeah, I agree. And also the fact that, they clearly work very closely with the ORR, got a great relationship there, which is very important. You can't get too chummy with the ORR because they are the safety regulator, but you got to work with them.
So we've asked the ORR if they can give us an update on the status of West Coast Railway Company's application for an exemption to allow them to use Mark 1s. If you remember, a couple of weeks ago, ORR told us that the findings of its assessment of the application had been given to West Coast and they were awaiting a response. If an exemption were to be granted, then that would be published on the ORR website, of which there is no sign. So we're trying to find out when that will be, and we will keep you posted as we've kept our finger on the pulse of this story throughout. Okay, before we talk a bit more about heritage, because that's really bubbling these days as a sector one way or the other, we wanted to give you a teaser of something seriously exciting that's coming soon. Because you interviewed Andy Byford last week, Richard, and although I haven't seen it yet, I'm told it's a cracker.
Oh, it is. It is. I did, and it is a cracker. Now, Andy Byford, if you aren't aware, not you, Nigel, obviously you are aware, right? But if anybody listening is not aware, he's a seriously big hitter in the world of railways. Now, his
globally too, globally.
Well, globally, and probably more in transit operations than sort of mainline rail operations. But how's this for a CV? These are just the big jobs. Chief Operating Officer of Rail Corp in New South Wales, Australia. CEO of the Toronto Transit Commission. I mean, how's this? CEO of New York Mass Transit Authority.
The subway.
Commissioner, the subway and the buses and some streetcars, right? Commissioner, Transport for London. And currently, I think, Executive Vice President for Amtrak, looking after the high-speed rail program. Now, I've known Andy a long time. We actually were at university at the same time, although we did different things. But we started at London Underground as graduates on pretty much the same day. It's an interview that is, we cover an extraordinary amount of stuff. I mean, it's extraordinary. It's honest, it's direct, it's passionate, and frankly, it's completely gripping and compelling. Here's a teaser when I asked Andy how he'd approached the task of sorting out New York. When you went to New York, I'd sort of look at your time at New York in sort of like two phases, really. And you'll probably say, no, it's a lot more nuanced than that. But it started, what feels like really positively. Yeah. It ended in more challenging circumstances, and we'll come on to that. But there must have been a point where it did shift. I mean, talk about the beginning, and maybe if you can, and you're happy to, talk about where it pivoted and why.
Sure. So the first year was fantastic. I remember even the first day, because the comms director said to me, Andy, this is a massive big deal that they are saying, wow, we've got some Brit coming to run the New York subway.
Were you the first ever non-US citizen to run it?
Correct.
Wow.
Correct. There's a guy called David Gunn, who, funnily enough, had also run the TTC, who has dual nationality, Canadian and American. I think he was born in America. The first and only ever Brit to run New York City. In fact, one of the things I'm most proud of, Richard, in my career is it's unique. I'm the only person ever to have run the largest transit systems in Canada, the US and the UK, plus on a day-to-day basis, Australia. So I'm very proud of that. But this comms director said to me, you are going to be met by a massive New York press mob. So we got to control this. And what I've arranged for is for them to meet us when you get off the train at Bowling Green, which is the station in Lower Manhattan outside the MTA's headquarters. And I think at the time they all thought it was a photo stunt, me arriving on the train, but it wasn't actually. I took the train or the bus to work every day. So anyway, I got on at Grand Central and I rode down the Lex to be met by this phalanx of reporters at Bowling Green. But the night before, because you've got to be a professional, the night before I'd gone down there in mufti, no one knew who I was. I went down there and I walked the route from the platform to the exit that I needed to go out of, because you don't want to be that idiot who doesn't know where they're going, even though you'd probably get given some license for that because it's your first day, right? I wanted to see for myself the route that I'd need to take. I'd also thought, Richard, beforehand, I'd thought extensively about keeping it simple. What is the essence of what needs to be done? And I thought about this. So anyway, I got off the train, cameras flashing. It was insane, that the media interest. And we walked through the station, people unfortunately kind of getting pushed out of the way, and to then hold a formal press conference outside 2 Broadway before I went into the building and got given my pass, etc., etc. And I stood up, and there's photos on the internet of this. I stood up and I said, obviously, I'm very honoured to have been selected. I'm very honoured to be asked to be the new president of New York City Transit. It seems to me there are 4 things that we need to do. Number 1, the most transformative thing that can and must be done is for the subway. We must re-signal the subway. There's 1940s fixed block signalling. We've got to move to CPTC, and we've got to expedite that rollout. Number 2, there's been a precipitous decline in bus ridership, and a lot of it is because the buses follow these circuitous routes, and because they're really not going where people need them to go, and there's too many stops, etc., etc. We need to reimagine the bus network. Number 3, we cannot be proud of a transit system until and unless all New Yorkers have access to it. So we must massively expedite making this subway fully accessible. And number 4, back to my earlier point, you can only do that with, not in spite of, with the frontline staff. You've got to bring them with you. You've got to have a vision that everyone believes in, into which they've had input, and that they feel part of. They've got skin in the game. So the 4th stream of what became my fast forward plan was that a success can only be delivered through excellent customer service, through cherished, respected colleagues. So that press conference seemed to go down pretty well. Within 100 days, we put together a strategic plan, which we call Fast Forward, and that was anchored around those 4 elements. And we then powered through this and had also a program called Save Safe Seconds, delivered by my senior vice president for subways, first ever woman appointed to that role on my watch, Sally Labrera. And Sally oversaw. Remember, I said it was 59% on time running?
Yeah.
By the time I left, it was 82% and climbing. So if nothing else, when Governor Cuomo asked me in that first time I'd ever met him, can you improve the subway within a year? We did, and more.
Blimey. Wow. I love that last bit when he's talking about how to transform things, Richard. What was it? You can only do that not in spite of the frontline staff. You've got to bring them with you. You've got to have a vision that everyone believes in, into which they've had input and that they feel part of. They've got skin in the game. I mean, you might think it's blindingly obvious, but too many people, it's not, is it? You don't see it as much as we need to. Next, CEO of GBR, take note of that.
Well, there was an interesting point in the interview. I'm not going to tell you what he said, because you've got to watch the interview, right? But I asked him and said, look, you've had all these massive jobs. You're back over in the US. We got a few issues in the UK right now. How about it? Could we tempt you back? So I did ask him that question. I have to listen to the interview to find out what he said. And it's definitely worth listening to. It's very interesting. But you're right. I mean, throughout the whole hour and a half, Nigel, it's about people, it's about leadership, it's about energy, it's about dynamism, it's about the basics, it's about not getting bogged down in process and bureaucracy and politics. It's just, I mean, I just sort of sat there and kind of go, yeah, keep going, Andy,
Which
keep
is
going.
all the things we do.
Yeah. So it honestly, it's look, we've done loads of interviews with some fantastic people. Everybody has to listen to it. I mean, that's not even a request. You've got to listen to it.
I mean, the things about people, they say the obvious, but I've heard some brilliant expressions about, surround yourself with the very best people. And I think it was Burkhardt who said something to me that I've never forgotten. He said, Nige, just get the best people and then just get out of the way.
Yeah. No, well,
I mean, it's not quite as simple as that, but there's a lot to be said for that implied empowerment of good people.
Agreed. But if you want to find out what happened in New York and what happened with Crossrail and what happened with, honestly,
watch the interview.
Watch the interview. It's a page turner.
A page turner. Okay, there's a mixed metaphor. The full interview with Andy will be published next week in a special episode of Green Signals on Tuesday, July the 2nd. And as Richard said, it's not a request. Do not miss that. You'll really miss some good stuff. It's really, really powerful stuff.
Indeed it is. Right. Back to heritage. And the adventure that Nigel and I had at the Ffestiniog and the Welsh Highland Railway at the weekend, where we were being glamorous, or the railway was being glamorous. I still wasn't quite sure where we went with that. Anyway, we actually went to North Wales for two reasons. One was to have a ride on the famous Gravity Train, which if you're tuning in on YouTube, you'll see some images of that whilst I'm talking. And it was fair to say that it was quite a memorable occasion, sheep on the line included. Nigel, did you enjoy it?
I absolutely did. It's the third time I've done the Gravity Train, and it's just amazing. It's not a comfortable ride, as I think you can now vouch, Richard, but it is. And I think even Paul Lewin's not sure, the general manager, but he believes it's unique globally. I don't think you can do that anywhere else. When you were saying about being glamorous, wasn't it the Eagles who had a song called Just Too Busy Being Fabulous? Maybe we should adopt it as our theme song.
Okay.
That should get the comments going. Anyway, the other reason we went to the Ffestiniog Railway was to speak to Paul Lewin, who's general manager of actually two heritage railways, the Ffestiniog Railway and the Welsh Highland Railway, which, just to put a scale on that, that's 80 miles of railway. I think he said, 160 miles of trackside, 20 working locomotives, 100 historic buildings. It's a big operation. And Paul's also vice chair of the Heritage Railway Association. The chairman, of course, is Lord Hendy, the chief exec, Steve Oates. So he's got some heavy hitters up on the top table there. But Paul is currently the longest serving general manager of any heritage railway. I think he's into his third decade. He's done two. And his knowledge, his passion, and his leaderships are absolutely second to none. We'll publish the full interview with Paul soon, but here's again another bit of a teaser. When Richard asked him from within Boston Lodge Works whether the financial bubble may be about to burst on heritage railways.
The late Michael Draper, when he was general manager of Severn Valley Railway, I think as long ago as sort of the early 80s, 1988, 1981, sort of suggested that the bubble would burst.
Yeah.
At some point, the bubble would burst. Is it about to burst? Are we now in a period where, something quite high profile could go wrong?
The prospect of bursting bubbles has been selling heritage railway publications for decades, hasn't it? The answer is that the bubbles are bursting all around us, but we just don't know what it looks like. So when we think, will the bubble burst, we have this picture of a railway closing down, the assets being sold off, some things being scrapped, all gone, isn't it sad, etc. It's not quite happening like that. What happens is, and particularly you will see it with smaller railways, is they just get smaller. So the timetable gets less, there are less people there, there's less turnover, they don't do quite so much, but they cling on. And there's just enough money from being a club of people putting in their subs and that, just to keep things going along at a bit of a slower rate. And if you look all around the country, you'll see places where timetables have been reduced, so doing less. I mean, we've reduced ours a little bit actually, but for a slightly different reason. But you'll see timetables reducing, number of overhauls reducing, things put to one side, things taking a whole lot longer. That is the bubble bursting.
Yeah.
Paul is never less than fascinating and compelling and articulate to listen to, is he?
No, he was one of the easiest people to interview, actually, because every answer was considered, clear,
Concise.
Concise, and yet never sounded pre-packaged or contrived. It was just bash. No, he was brilliant, and it's very enlightening.
It is.
It's really good. And I apologize that we're not showing you the whole thing. It's not a hugely long interview, but we're doing it as part of a wider heritage piece, and there's actually quite a bit of editing to do, and I just haven't quite managed to have the time, but thought it was really useful to share that bit of a teaser. But it was
and I
fun,
think he
wasn't it?
started in 1979 as a 15-year-old, didn't he?
Amazing.
So he's been there a long time. He's a very special as a general manager. His Paul. And I used to say, at one point in the interview, he actually put his hand on his left chest and he said, "The Ffestiniog and the Welsh Highland Rail, they're in my heart." And I thought that was a particularly, compelling moment.
Yeah.
So,
totally agree.
Something else we also want to touch on this week affects both heritage and regular mainline operations, especially when the two interact with mainline running of steam locomotive, and that's trespass. We saw some truly frightening footage recently from the CPKC Final Spike steam tour in Mexico, where people were crowding the tracks in front of the Empress Canadian Pacific 2816. One woman was so close she even had her phone knocked out of her hand by the locomotive as it passed, and later, tragically, a woman was struck and killed while trying to take a selfie with the train standing next to her young son. It happens here. We've got a particularly compelling piece of video here with a link we can put to YouTube, where a gentleman came, like that lady, very close to being killed. And it's scary, isn't it, Richard?
It's really scary. I should just say we've not shown or linked any of the Mexico footage. You can find it on YouTube if you know where to look. But frankly, it is distressing, and we just didn't think that was appropriate. But it is. But the Flying Scotsman one's been around so many times. We thought we would put a link to that. But no, I agree. You just you suddenly realise that actually people just don't understand the danger, and you'd think they would. You'd think it would be obvious, but it's clearly not. And the whole education piece just continues to be so important, doesn't it?
And while the scenes in Mexico were at the very extreme end of trespass, we're sadly not immune from it. When Flying Scotsman came back to the main line in 2016, we saw some unbelievably dangerous behaviour from people walking on the tracks to take photos of the steam locomotive while other trains were passing on adjacent lines. And all trains on the East Coast main line had to be stopped as a result, causing over 8 hours of delay minutes and to 59 services and costing the railway £60,000 in compensation. I was on that train, and it was a horrifying thing to see. And the thing about it is, Richard, it's never, and this is why it's so difficult to solve, it doesn't seem to be enthusiasts. I actually saw a woman with a pushchair bumping over the ballast shoulder 10 metres from a foot crossing to get a better view. So if it is, quote, ordinary people, it's really hard to get the message over to them in a way that's fairly straightforward to get it to the enthusiast community, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure you're right that there's because that particular engine draws out a different kind of crowd, and something we've talked about before. But I wouldn't either. Then I wouldn't say that enthusiasts are
blameless,
insulated or blameless from this. No, I've seen some really daft things of people on ladders trying to get those sort of high up shots and all sorts of stuff. I mean, what it did bring to mind is just how serious trespass is as an issue. Network Rail do some superb. I mean, really
They do.
superb stuff in terms of trying to educate. They do lots of stuff with schools and so trying to educate people on the dangers and the risks. So we're gonna do a deeper dive. I kind of hate that phrase, but anyway, we're going to do a deeper dive into the issue, look at some of the complexities around trespass, what the railway's doing about it. And we'll try and do that as soon as we can, with summer holidays obviously coming up soon, and with children out of school, that it's a particularly concerning time of the year. But it's not just kids, it's just general awareness of, just how unsafe the railway environment can be, and how actually, if you treat it with respect, it's fine. But if you don't, it's not fine. So
it is a killer.
That's
the only way to describe it.
It is a killer. So yeah, it's a very salutary subject. No apologies for raising it, because it's really important that people do understand how risky and dangerous it is. It's always difficult to segue from something like that, but we'll have a little moment pause, and shall we now move on to the quiz?
Absolutely, a perfect opportunity for my scorn and bile, isn't it?
Well, it is if you want to, but I'd prefer it if you didn't. But that's okay. Not to worry. We'll move swiftly on. So if you remember, last week's answer was about the Euston Doric Arch, which we said isn't actually an arch. And I said, whilst there wouldn't be a mug involved, present company accepted, what actually is it?
And I nearly blurted it out.
You did. You did. You should take Mr. Robertson's advice, shouldn't you? Because it's not actually an arch. We had portico suggested. That's serious blooming portico. We had Parthenon, but it's actually a proper liam. There you go. As correctly identified by Trident Music 5570 on YouTube. So well done.
And how do you say
correct.
it? I've often wondered, Richard.
Well, I would say proper liam.
Okay.
But
Let's see if we can have a go at your pronunciation like they do at mine.
Oh, yeah, well, quite possibly. Right. Okay. So last week's question, which I was quite proud of this one, because I thought I love a good anagram. Right. The question was, where would I be if I were between a wettish hall and an adhering body? And actually, a lot of people got it. I was impressed.
I would
fact,
never get it. I don't have that kind of a brain. I just don't.
One person got it in about 5 minutes. It was amazing. It was brilliant. Anyway, wettish hall is an anagram of Holtwist, and adhering body is an anagram of Hayden Bridge, 2 stations on the Carlisle to Newcastle line, and the station between them is Barden Mill. So if you said Barden Mill, you were correct. We put all the people that said Barden Mill in a hat, and the winner is Liam Bramall, who entered by email. So congratulations, Liam. If you send us another email on info@greensignals.org to tell us where you would like your mug sent, we'll get it on its way to you.
I did notice that one of the winners was none other than not one of the winners, one of the entrants was Ian Stewart, CBE, chairman of the Transport Select Committee, who was correct. Who got a correct answer.
It was correct.
But he didn't win. Close, but no cigarian, sorry.
Yeah, there's no favoritism on this show.
Absolutely
it's genuinely random. It's genuinely random, right? So, to this week's quiz. So, a quote this week. We're back to quotes, right? I would like to know who was fond of saying, amongst many other things, the following. If you're in a hanging mood, hang people like pictures in the best light. So who was fond of saying, if you're in a hanging mood, hang people like pictures in the best light? If you think you know.
Absolutely no idea.
It is a railway person, but there you go. It's not completely random, right? Either send us an email to info@greensignals.org if you don't want anybody else to see your answer, or YouTube if you don't care. But we do need the answers by midday on Saturday. What will that be? It'll be the 29th, won't it? The 29th of June.
26th today.
Yeah.
So
well, thank you for revealing when we record the show. Brilliant. There you go.
Well, why shouldn't we?
We try and keep it current, I suppose.
Well,
That's the point.
you have
Isn't it?
said in the past we've recorded this on a particular day, so I'm not doing anything different.
Oh, all right. Don't be sensitive. Right. Okay. That's the quiz.
I'll say something that's not neither scornful nor bile, and I'm still in the wrong.
Here you go, dear listener. As you can see, Nigel has let that comment go. It has only been mentioned about 927,000 times since it was
Always
made.
in it.
Anyway.
Only the depth varies. Anyway, let us proceed. Finally, our good news spot. Avanti West Coast, yeah, I might surprise you, do find good news to be in a bit of short supply most of the time. So it's great to see that they've reached a really important milestone this week. They have welcomed the 56th and final refurbished Pendolino set back into its fleet from Alstom's Widnes depot, which, if I'm not mistaken, was established for this very purpose, for this refurb. It's been a £117 million investment in these trains and the UK's biggest ever fleet upgrade, refurbishing a whacking 574 carriages in just over 2 years. And that's one every 2 weeks, so I think that's pretty good going. So let's hear it for the men and women of Widnes who've kept up that momentum and done such a great job. But Richard, how does it feel to hear the train you bought is now past its midlife refurb?
Yeah, it's slightly salutary, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind a bit of a midlife refurb myself, but I think, unfortunately, we're a bit beyond that now.
It does make you think, doesn't it? Because I remember going to Sevigliano before they even started building them with a Virgin party, including you and Will Whitehorn and Chris Green. And you think, what? How can it be that long?
Do you know, the tenders went out in something like April 1997. Heads of terms agreed and commitments made in 98, financial close in 99, because it was very complex financing. That's why it took as long as it did. But 1997 was when those tenders went out. And I still have the booklet that GEC Alstom made, published, which shows almost like the, what would you call it? The story of their bid. So there's pictures of all the team doing the designing and in the meetings, and there's lots of diagrams and everything. It's a beautiful little thing, and I still actually have that from all those years ago.
They're worth keeping, really, those things. Actually, here's a circular connection. JT, who you mentioned earlier from his balcony in Benidorm, in the pod, I had a cab trip with JT on a Class 87 in the latter days. And he was gleefully referring to them as flying Fiats, the Pendolinos, which he said the management didn't really like.
I loved those trains, I must admit, and they were the world away from what they replaced. As much as we love all that old stuff, I think the Pendolinos are really rather wonderful. But there you go. It is a few years ago now, and well done. The refurb's superb, by the way.
But a carriage every 2 weeks is some going.
Yeah.
So well done, well done, Widnes. And sadly, with that little bit of alliteration, that's all we've got time for this week. It's flown by. I've really enjoyed recording that this week, Richard. It's been good fun. It always is, but that was a particularly good one. So thanks so much for watching or listening. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, leave a comment. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel on YouTube. And do join us again next week, because we've passed a bit of a milestone on YouTube, haven't we, Richard?
We have. We've got over 4,000 subscribers now. And what we also know from the stats is it normally takes about 20 something months to get to 1,000. So we got to 4,000 in pretty rapid time. But we also know that there's an awful lot of people who listen regularly who are not subscribers. So please do subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything to just subscribe. And it's a great way of helping us build the channel and doing more of this stuff and listening to us blather on about trains.
And if you're one of the 4,000, thank you so much for your support. We absolutely, on behalf of Steph, Richard, and myself, thank you ever so much, because it means more to us than I could possibly put into words. So thank you. And do come back again next week, when we'll be here, as Richard put it, blathering about trains, hopefully in some sort of intelligent manner. But for now, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
Thanks for being with us, and see you soon.